Is it still too early days to say which candidate will win the African National Congress presidential race? Why is Mpumalanga's so-called vote for unity being criticized by some of the ANC's rank and file? Is the ANC losing the fight against factionalism and slate politics? What can be done or what can be made of the recent meeting between President Jacob Zuma and the presidential candidates? What time is it? It's question time. Good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Simpiwe Ngongwane, standing in for Mpotsedu. Well, it is only 10 days left before the African National Congress 54th National Elective Conference. The much-awaited event continues to dominate headlines, with all 9 provinces of just completing their provincial general councils. While Dr. Nkosazana, Dlamini-Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa have emerged as front-runners, a lot will depend on what transpires during the conference. A few weeks ago, outgoing President Jacob Zuma met those running for the party's top post. He said, quote, "I was worried about the conference, which is being looked at seriously, not just by the ANC, but also by the world." Now, the ANC is one of the big organizations in the world. Whatever it does, people look at it. And tonight, Question Time continues its analysis of the ANC's fiercely contested event. We are live, therefore you can call us and air your views on the following numbers: 089 110 4210. If you're calling from beyond the borders, it's +27 89 110 4210, or tweet us your comments. Our Twitter handle is @QuestionTime24. All right, my guests today are Professor Lesiba Tifo, who is a political analyst in Pretoria Studios, and Professor Peter Krukamp, a political analyst. Now, is it still early days to say which candidate will win? They'll tell us more about it. A very good afternoon to you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to start with you, Pete. Now, is it still too early to say which candidate will win in 10 days' time?
It's still too early. If you do the facts and the figures, you will come to the conclusion that Cyril Ramaphosa is most likely to win, is very likely to win. The reason why we say it's too early is because a lot can happen which is opportunistic, which might be illegal, which has to do with political pressure, which got nothing to do with the fairness of the process. And I think that's why some people say it's too early.
All right, so what should we expect in coming days now that the PGCs have concluded?
Well, I think Cyril Ramaphosa has to defend territory. I think that it is his gains. He has to defend that. But Dlamini-Zuma and her camp will really start thinking about how can they make inroads, how can they change people's minds, what will it take to get the delegates to the conference to vote for her as opposed to vote for Cyril Ramaphosa. And they might come to the point where they say the cost of losing is incredibly high. In KwaZulu-Natal, most of the people, they fear for their lives, they fear for their jobs, they fear for their futures if Cyril Ramaphosa wins this election.
Right. Now, Professor Tifo, let me bring you into the conversation and welcome again to the show. Now that the PGCs have concluded and now that we have, we've got the figures now, do you get a sense of what will be happening at the ANC elective conference at Nazareth in 10 days' time?
Yeah, well, greetings to my colleague Pete. Yes, I think a picture is emerging that suggests that there are 2 candidates here, and the rest indeed, I think, may be beginning to negotiate how best they can be accommodated, if indeed they still want to be accommodated, because there are those among the 7 that I thought they were planted or they've decided to move into this race, but not necessarily because they are keen to win. No, they fancy their chances. That's the first one. There are those that I think strategically they are there to ensure that the candidate they favor will ultimately get their lot at the last minute when they throw it behind them. So there are several permutations that I would look at, but all things being equal. It was in 2007 when an attempt was made to change the history, the tradition, and the practice of the ANC. And in particular, by the protagonist of change today. And I wonder how they expect to win when they've set a precedent in 2007, which was consistent with the decision taken in 1949. So I'm saying, I'm nailing my color to the mast and I'm prepared to eat humble pie, that it would be too difficult that the tradition of the ANC, namely that the deputy president should succeed to the highest office of that organization would not prevail.
All right, now let's talk about Mpumalanga, Pete. Now we see that David Mabuza still hasn't nailed his colors to the mast. He still hasn't decided who he's favoring to lead the party in 10 days' time. Why do you think that is?
Well, he tried to get onto both slates at some stage, and he's still trying to manipulate the process by forcing himself into the process. You know that he's got significant influence in Mpumalanga, but if you look at the number of people who decided to vote either for Cyril Ramaphosa or for Dlamini-Zuma, it means that at least half, or very close to half of the delegates, he does not really control, but he does control a certain percentage, and he tries to use that to get him in some or other way into national politics. And by force. But if you look at the way that he's been ignored almost by both Ramaphosa and Dlamini-Zuma, then both of them obviously think that he's a hot potato and he should be avoided at all costs.
All right, let's go to Tembisa now, and Mr. Shabalala is there. Very good afternoon to you.
Excellent.
Go for it,
Good
sir.
afternoon. How are you?
Great, how are you? Go for it.
Yes, I see that there's a problem with this voting stations or electing the candidates to take part as presidents of South Africa. Why didn't we do it with Mandela in the first place? There's too much cooks in the pot. There's too much people who wants to take a competition, whereas it shouldn't be a competition. In English, they say too many cooks spoil the broth. We should know whom are we going to take after Zuma at the present moment. We shouldn't be picking people all over the show and said we're opting for presidential for this person and that person. That's my view. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Shabalala from Tembisa, thank you so much for calling us. How do you respond to that, Pete?
Well, I think the other viewpoint of this is that competition is healthy. And to a certain degree, if there was just a natural process, it's almost as if you discourage people from being involved in the ANC. I think the participation, the active participation, the activism that is typical of the ANC is really encouraged again because there's some form of competition within the ANC. This thing of inheriting authority is not good for any political party or for any political system.
All right. Professor Tifo, what do you think of that? What do you think of the caller's sentiment that it shouldn't actually be a competition? The deputy president should automatically ascend to the presidency?
Yes, I understand that is based on the history I was alluding to. But the challenge for the ANC lies in the fact that it wants to remain a liberation movement and at the same time, right, a modern party. Because if they had decided and they have had the courage of their conviction, they would have transformed themselves into a modern party and ensured that a president will be elected by MNC members for the ANC. But the president for the country would be elected by the people of the country. That the electorate will choose their representative to represent them in parliament. This speaks to the change of the Electoral Act, which change they agreed to and requested through Kada Asmal, the late Dr. Van Slabet, who gave them at least a report. I think it's in the SG's office that recommended constituency-based system and proportional representation. The ANC is in this trouble right now precisely because it wants to be a liberation movement, holding to tradition, while all the same time modernity beckons and they don't know how to marry the two. But it is doable if they have the courage, their conviction. The documents I've read suggest to me that it will be on the agenda come next week.
All right, the jury is still out on that, Professor. Thank you. Let's now welcome Digetso. A very good afternoon to you, Digetso.
Hi, thank you for welcoming me.
Indeed.
So I think Prof is actually mentioned this that the thing that I wanted to say very well right now. I think the ANC does not want to transform. I think if ANC wanted to transform, they could have looked at how people respond to the candidate that they put. Because if you look at some of the candidates, some of the voters of the ANC do not actually prefer those people. They might prefer other person that is sitting somewhere that is being incubated by the ANC for whatever reason. I think the ANC needs to transform, needs to include people that vote for them in this sort of matters. Thank you.
All right, Digeso, thank you so much for joining us. Digeso is basically saying that the ANC does not want to transform, and I think that speaks to what the sentiments of many ANC members, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Kgalema Motlanthe, amongst others, saying that the ANC needs to lose at the elections in 2019 in order for it to self-correct and learn a lesson. What do you think of that?
You know, all this trauma that the ANC is going through is really, really unnecessary. If Jacob Zuma didn't start with this whole state capturing process, I think if the ANC they could have remained a liberation movement and be an honest and fair system of political control if they just...
What do you mean that they should have remained a liberation movement? What are they now?
Well, I think that they're still a liberation movement, but they battle, and I think the professor is quite rightly stated the point that they battle between either being a liberation movement and being a political party. In a political party context, leadership is up for contest. There's competition and contest within the party, and leadership is changed because of competition and because of, say, the popularity within the party. But eventually that spills over international politics. As it is now, they try it. It's almost like the old king system that you have in England. You know, the Queen. They want to inherit authority, and I think that's where the problem starts. Do you inherit authority? Do you hand authority to somebody? Or do you allow somebody to be elected based on policies and based on fair contest and contestation? And the one is the liberation movement, the other one is a modern political party. I think the ANC doesn't have much of a choice. They have entered that fray of fair political competition now. They cannot revert back to the liberation movement days.
Interesting views there. Let's go to Kaklehong and Bonagere is there. Very good afternoon.
Hi, Simpiwe. Hello, and how are you, Khoto?
I'm okay. How are you, ma'am?
I'm okay. Mamela, hey, I thought, all these years, I thought maybe I know the ANC. No, I was wrong, because right now, we're never told, because really, I don't know, what can I say? Whether it's a policy or whatsoever, I don't know. But it was a culture. The second deputy president, the deputy president obviously is going to be a president. So now of lately, everything has changed. So really, I'm so confused. And the worst part that I don't really understand, even if whatever you can say, but Nkosazana Zuma, it's Zuma, ex-wife Zuma, or whatever how you wanted to call it. But how can you do it? Zimbabwe have fight for that. Yeah, we must take Nkosazana Zuma to be our deputy, to be our president. I can't understand. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. And I guess that's a view that's shared by so many people out there who are actually asking the question, what happened to the ANC of Nelson Mandela? What happened to the ANC of Oliver Tambo? Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Well, and a reminder that you can call us and air your views. The number to dial is 089 110 4210. Or if you're calling beyond the borders, it is +27 89 110 4210. Question time. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
We take an in-depth look of all your stories of the day across the world.
Last month, Mkhwebane said that the bank had failed in its duties to protect the public by not ensuring that ABSA repaid an apartheid-era bailout given to the failed bank, Bank-Corp. The rand fell nearly 2% on her remarks.
My effort, in my opinion, is going to be to build a Zimbabwe that I believe in, as opposed to remaking a Zimbabwe of the past that I cannot do anyway. So I'm absolutely clear on this.
We need to start showing more commitment by government that they are committed to working with business, and therefore that should start to stimulate confidence, and with confidence comes investment, and with investment hopefully comes growth.
Stay tuned to Primetime News every day from 18 hours.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time, and let's go to Limpopo now. And Larasa is on the line. A very good afternoon to you.
Yes. How are you? It's Larasa from Zivijela Makopo.
All right. Welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, let me be honest. Those will be voting year 17 on national conference. They must know that their job are limited.
What do you mean by this, Larissa?
They will be treated fairly.
What makes you say that? What do you mean by that?
No, I mean it like what my prophet said.
All right.
Am I on the wrong page?
No. I'm just asking to you to get into detail by that.
Yes. I mean, those supporting NDZ will treat the ones who supporting CR17 very bad. Because KwaZulu-Natal, they don't want anyone to support Mr. Ramaphosa.
All right. Nkosazana, thank you so much for your time. What do you make of that?
I'm not sure what he said. Does he say that the CR17, they will lose their jobs if...
That's what he said. That's why I asked him to
it's not way off the mark. He didn't explain himself, but I think that's largely what it is about. It's about positions, it's about control, it's about access to the resources of the state. And it is assumed that if you don't win, your faction will lose those privileges. That's why the stakes is so high, especially in KwaZulu-Natal and in the rural provinces. The fact is that many people will lose access to the state, the patronage of the state, the patronage of master patrons like the premiers and the mayors and the president in those areas. And it will come at a massive cost for their families. You must remember, politicians in South Africa, that's all they do. They're only politicians. There's no fallback position. And with Thabo Mbeki it happened, with Nelson Mandela it happened. The fact is, if you lose, it's very likely that the new order, a new authority, will replace many of the positions within the state with people that are loyal to them in the National Prosecuting Authority, in intelligence, and in the provinces, and even at the level of local government. Which means it is true that if you don't win, the cost is enormously high, and that you might lose a lot of privileges and access to the state.
All right. Now, Professor, in Pretoria, back to you. Now, reading into the last caller's sentiment, let's now briefly analyze the presidencies of Cyril Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Well, the reason I'm using these two candidates is that they are the front runners. What would it mean for the country if Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma would take over? What would it mean for the country if Cyril Ramaphosa could take over?
Look, for both of them have what it takes for me. As a minister, Nkosazana Zuma acquitted herself very well. I think one thing that stands out for me, and that will go with her to a grave, her firm position on smoking. I think that is a major part of her legacy. I think as an administrator, she's competent, she's capable, she acquitted herself well. As far as the AU is concerned, the jury's out. The non-South Africans would say she was out there, but her eyes were in South Africa, her focus was on South Africa, and indeed she was just temporarily exiled when others were preparing for her to take the supreme office, political office in South Africa. Ramaphosa has been in the trenches for a long time. He's also a consummate administrator, business acumen, and I think he also has the political pedigree as good as Nkosazana's. But the problem with Nkosazana, I think, is the millstone she carries around her neck, namely the surname Zuma. I think maybe if she had discarded that surname then, it would have been better. But some would argue then she wouldn't be contesting now, because her prospect might have been much dimmer or non-existent at all. So I don't think the same name sends her in a good set, and the former husband hasn't done enough, indeed, to lend credibility and assistance to her project. Never mind his attempts and his plain outright endorsement of him. Coming to Cyril, I think we can expect that he could do better. He's an economist in Coast, in that he's a businessman who acquitted himself reasonably well and less tainted in terms of corruption. Yes, he's not a perfect man, but he's a better bet for me, at least for now.
Surely he can't be perfect. What are the main problems that could be attributed to him?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's just the immediate developments. Marikana would come back to haunt him, and some would argue, and I may be one of those, that when he had an opportunity as a former trade unionist to amass wealth and got the opportunity, he should have invited more people to come on board. Rather, and like many others, they used the privileges to enrich themselves. So they used politics as a vehicle to self-enrichment, rather than to say, as a unionist at heart, right, I'm about the other and not about the self. I think for me, that's another major indictment, especially those who use political office to amass their wealth. They who would have otherwise have been ordinary people had they not ridden on the political ticket of the ANC. Perhaps some of them even riding on the corpses of former comrades to get where they are. So yes, I concede he has some problems here and there, but he would still get my nod and indeed my vote.
I was hoping you would ask me the same question.
Yeah, indeed, go ahead.
If you look at Dlamini-Zuma, no, her track record is not clean.
Yeah.
First of all, she was involved in the Sarafina scandal. She was the first, call it corrupt cabinet minister, there's no doubt about it, who was pointed out by Nelson Mandela. The second thing was, remember, she was responsible for the Vairudin disaster in South Africa, and the Harvard study has shown that 340,000 young black babies in South Africa died because of Thabo Mbeki's AIDS policies. She was right at the heart of it. She introduced that Vairudin klepto type of science to the cabinet and to the ANC. So no, she hasn't got a clear history. And as the professor has said, on the AU or the African Union, the jury is still very out. So she actually has got no history of effective government. And then the most important, if you look at the people that surrounds herself, the Premier League people that she surrounds herself, it's obvious that she surrounds herself with people that is associated with state capture. And it's not possible to get rid of these people after she's been elected, because they got her where she is. If you look at Cyril Ramaphosa, I think the thing about Marikana has been overblown a lot by a lot of people. There's no evidence that he was directly involved in the killing of people. Yes, he's associated by implication with it, but the fact remains is you cannot blame him for the death of the people. And the other thing is that I think that's important, if you look at him, is he clearly goes on a ticket which says, and he's outspoken, I will stop state capture. I know the cost of corruption in South Africa. I think if he is elected tomorrow, you will see the rand will improve, will strengthen. You will see that there's a likeliness of us regraded again. The economy will recover. There's a good chance of recovering under him. It has got absolutely no chance of recovering within the first 3 to 5 years under Dlamini-Zuma.
Right. Now, Professor, back to you in Pretoria, all the reasons that you've just articulated about the likelihood of either candidate winning the presidency, could it be the reason why David Mabuza is still not sure who he supports? I mean, essentially making him the kingmaker, and apparently he's enjoying all the limelight at this point.
Yes, but I think I'm not sure if he has not overplayed his hand or overreached himself, because some people want to believe that Mr. Unity is a code name for DD Mabuza. That's number one. Number two, if you look at the figures, right, it says Mr. Unity got about 250. Ramaphosa and Nkosazana are almost neck and neck, a difference of 18 or 20 votes, right? And that is a telling story for me, because one had hoped, based on what we have been getting up to this point, was that Nkosazana was going to get it holus bolus, or it was going to get a landslide. So it tells me, if we were to disaggregate the 250 of Mr. Unity and say divide them by 7, meaning the 7 presidential candidates, give them whatever, each one will get about 33 or 37 votes. Cyril still will come tops, if not very close with Nkosazana, but she being a little bit ahead. So what does it say? For me, the statistics as I look at it, the Cyril doesn't need to have 100% in KwaZulu-Natal, in Northwest and in Mpumalanga. 30% is enough, because other areas really are favoring him. He's doing well. Just make sure that the 3 provinces I've mentioned don't unite and come up with one slate.
Why your question is a good one is David Mabuza, in spite of what we say about him, was nominated as deputy president most of all candidates. There's nobody competing with him. In other words, there is substantial support in some other way for him in the ANC for deputy presidency.
Why do you think he's not coming out in the open then on who he's supporting? I mean, he already has the deputy presidency in the NTZ slate.
Well, the reason why he doesn't come out is he knows that Cyril Ramaphosa is ahead. And he hopes that Dlamini-Zuma will win because he thinks he's more likely to become the deputy president then. So he's really between two very hot spots, and it's very difficult for him to play his card. He's not a good politician. He's one of the strongmen of South African politics. He's implicated in murders. He's implicated in corruption. He's one of the guys who know only power politics. And this time, you have to be intelligent and you have to think very creatively and nuanced about how you're going to play your political card, and he battles.
And the fact that, both of you gentlemen, the fact that, remember, in the run-up to Polokwane, he was supporting Thabo Mbeki, but then when he realized that Jacob Zuma, is about to win, he changed camps and then did support President Zuma. So I think that sort of defines what he really is.
Exactly.
All right, but gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thanks to you at home for being a part of the show. Till next time then, it's goodbye from Johannesburg.